Good evening and welcome to Primetime Lawmakers, GPB's nightly coverage of the Georgia General Assembly for Wednesday, February 8th, 2012, the 17th legislative day of the 2012 session. I'm Scott Slade. And coming up in tonight's program, following hours of heated debate, the constitutional amendment allowing state charter schools fails to pass the House. The House will reconsider its action tomorrow. Wild animals invade the Capitol. No, not the lobbyists. It's Sportsman's Day. Our Jackie Brittain has that story. We'll get behind the scenes of that charter schools debate tonight as well. Garrett of the Georgia School Superintendents Association will be here to explain how the whole charter system works and local problems with the proposal. An in-depth analysis of Capitol news. Tonight, Andre Jackson, Editorial Page Editor for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and Donna, Lowry of WXIA TV in Atlanta, 11 Alive will both join us. All that and more is coming up tonight on Primetime Lawmakers. But first, we go live to Sandra Parrish at the state capitol, where a measure on charter schools narrowly failed today. Sandra.
That's right, Scott. The resolution is aimed at addressing a state Supreme Court decision last May that ruled it was unconstitutional to allow a state commission to approve charter schools and divert money from local school systems to pay for them. Today's vote, however, was in limbo from the start. The morning began with Speaker Pro Tem Jan Jones, who's sponsoring the measure, huddling with House leaders, wondering if they had the votes to pass it. After a quick Rules Committee meeting, the constitutional amendment headed to the House floor.
The court decision invalidated the state's general authority to authorize public charter schools, a practice that the state has been doing for the last 10 years.
Jones tried to allay concerns by the majority of Democrats that the measure would take away money from local school systems.
We will come up with a state funding formula. It will continue to be fully funded at the state, but it will be the same number.
I am concerned that the state would have unprecedented power to create charter schools under the guise of a very vague definition without any constraints other than the ability to change the law to accommodate their end.
Well, first, it sounds like you don't support charter schools.
The issue has divided the Democratic Party. Representative Alicia Thomas Morgan among 3 Democrats who helped write the measure.
It's about those little girls in green jackets. I'm referring to the girls at Ivy Preparatory Academy, a charter school in Gwinnett County that is all girls, 98% of color, and 70% free and reduced lunch, where last year 100% of their school met and exceeded standards on English language arts, 94% of them met and exceeded standards on math.
If you vote for this bill, it would take away money from the local taxpayers. That's not good. If you can afford a green jacket, you can pay for a charter school.
What 1162 does is leaves to legislatures of the future a blank slate upon which to write law and upon which to exclude locally elected officials from the process.
The constitutional amendment failed just 10 votes shy. A motion was made to reconsider the vote tomorrow.
I think there's some misunderstanding about what this is about and why this is so necessary. And so perhaps we have to do an even better job of communicating that to legislators so that they understand. But I'm not giving up, and we'll just try again.
Both Representatives Morgan and Abrams tell me each side is pretty solid on their stance, but they're hoping a compromise can be reached before the end of the session. Scott?
Bring it back up again. I'm a little surprised here. Normally with a vote this important, the leadership's pretty sure of an outcome before they ever bring it up for a vote. Were they surprised it went down today?
I think so, Scott. Actually, there were about 7 Republicans that actually sided with the Democrats on this. They had another 3 that were absent today. That could have made the difference. Maybe they didn't see that those numbers were weighing the other way, but I think that's why they have moved to bring that back up again. They will reconsider that vote tomorrow and then bring up the bill. We'll probably have the whole discussion all over again.
Probably so. Thank you, Sandra. Also under the Gold Dome today, the Senate passed 3 pieces of legislation. Our Keosha Howard has those details.
Today, the Senate passed a measure that would transfer the Comptroller General from the Insurance Commissioner's office to the State Accounting Office for more efficiency. Sponsor, Senator Bill Heath, explains what the Comptroller General does.
The Comptroller General essentially examines and countersigns all warrants upon the state treasury by the governor, the president of the Senate, or the Speaker of the House. Audits accounts against the state. He or she collects evidence of debt due the state from any source other than taxes and to pay over the debt to the state treasury.
The measure now moves to the House. Also passing the Senate today, 2 bills that affect Georgia's court system. One concerns the training of municipal court judges. The other allows municipal courts to hire prosecutors. Senator John Crosby presents both bills.
This bill simply provides that if you're going to hold court in a municipality, then you must receive a certain amount of training each year. And if you don't receive that training, then under this bill, then the Judicial Qualifications Commission could remove you from being a sitting judge. Senate Bill 352 simply provides that, it gives the municipal courts the authority to employ prosecuting attorneys.
Both of those measures passed unanimously and now move over to the House. Reporting for Primetime Lawmakers, I'm Keosha Howard.
99 barrels of beer on the wall? Well, a lot more than that if a bill regarding Georgia brew pubs makes it through the legislature this year. The House Regulated Industries Committee today passed a bill which would change the maximum number of barrels of beer the brew pubs can manufacture and sell on premises. That amount goes from 5,000 to 10,000 barrels under the measure sponsored by Representative Richard Smith. The bill also removes the restriction that the beer must be sold in draft form. The legislation would also increase the amount that those same brew pubs could sell to licensed wholesalers from 500 to 5,000 barrels annually. The committee passed the measure. It moves on to House rules. Today, the Capitol served as a different kind of sporting arena. Hunters, anglers, and all other outdoor sports lovers gathered to hear the governor speak on preserving Georgia's wildlife. Of course, the day wouldn't be complete without a look at Georgia's finest species. Primetime Lawmakers' Jackie Brittain was there.
Sportsman's Day at the Capitol proved to be nothing short of wild when it was overtaken by a bald eagle, snakes, and many other forms of wildlife. The annual event is held by the Georgia Department of Natural Resources to promote the importance of preserving Georgia's place as the #1 hunting destination state in the nation.
We are so blessed as a state and a community to be richly with the heritage not only of hunting and fishing, but the protection of our wildlife.
Every year, hundreds of thousands of Georgia residents and visitors to our state come to our coast to enjoy the seafood, the scenic vistas, and to soak up the sun on our beaches. Collectively, they generate an economic impact in excess of $2 billion.
Even the Hawks showed up. No, not the basketball team, but the species in an inviting but unnatural environment under the Gold Dome. Oh, really? And the great symbol of our nation, the bald eagle, was on display, eager to entertain by expanding his wings. And reptiles, although slithery and perhaps a bit scary, proved to be quite friendly. However, snakes are still hunted in Georgia, mainly because of the fear they bring. And with 4 different species of rattlesnakes in Georgia, who wouldn't be a little concerned?
This is the yellow rat snake, no relation though to the rattlesnake. And if you kill one of these babies, even with a permit, it's a $1,000 fine.
If we didn't have to have a permit, kids would go out and collect them and make pets out of them. And that would devastate the population.
And when it comes to hunting, the rules may change soon in Georgia. The bill that would allow hunters to use silencers on firearms has passed the Senate and is under review in the House. The Georgia Hunting and Fishing Federation says that the bill would only relate to a small group of people and is a long and expensive proposition for those who would take part in it. However, they say it would benefit farmers in South Georgia. Reporting for Primetime Lawmakers, I'm Jackie Brittain.
There's certainly a great deal of debate about charter schools and how they should be integrated into the public school system from a regulation and curriculum standpoint, but perhaps most of all from a financial standpoint. As you saw in our highlights of the House debate today in the resolution that would provide for state-created charter schools, opinions vary a great deal. But you may be wondering, what is a charter school? Well, let's dig into that. According to the Public School Review, charter schools fit in a niche between private and public schools. They're funded with public money, except for their facilities, and they're an alternative to regular public schools. A private group of people can submit and get approved to run their school. Charter schools receive waivers from public school districts in exchange for promising better academic results. Charters usually given for 3 to 5 years, where an eye is kept on academic performance. If academic performance lags behind comparable public schools, then the charter is pulled and the school is closed. Charter schools are emerging as an alternative to the traditional system of education. Chartering also allows the school to run autonomously the existing public school system. Tonight, we're talking about Georgia's charter schools, and I'm joined on set by Herb Garrett, the Executive Director of the Georgia School Superintendents Association. We also contacted 4 co-sponsors of the charter schools legislation to be with us tonight, and unfortunately, none of them were able to join us. First of all, Herb, thank you very much for being here this evening.
Thanks.
Let's start in just a moment here on how the Superintendents Association feels about this move toward charter schools, particularly in the form of this constitutional amendment resolution that was defeated in the House today.
Our association has been very much supportive of charter schools, but we believe that they should be done in concert with local boards of education. We have not been in favor of the constitutional amendment that failed to receive the requisite number of votes today, and there are really 2 issues with that. One has to do with the provision in the amendment that would allow the state to establish charter schools in local districts over the objections of a local board of education, and then of course the funding issue, which we'll talk more about in a few moments.
So let's back up to the local control issue for just a second before we get into the money part of that. The component that the local school board has, that's mandated by the state constitution already.
That's true, and that seems to have been affirmed by the recent Supreme Court decision. Prior to that, though, there was an entity that had been set up by a piece of legislation from 2008 called the Charter Schools Commission, and it was an appointed body from Atlanta that was able to set up charter schools over the objection of local school boards.
So there's plenty of charter schools out there that have the approval of local school boards, don't they?
Yes, there are.
Including Gwinnett County schools, very notably, their online charter high school.
That's correct.
Is up and running right
and there
now.
are some systems, entire systems, that are charter systems, such as Marietta City and Gainesville and even Floyd County, and Fulton County is on the cusp of becoming the largest charter system in the state itself.
So your position is that local school boards still need to have a yay or nay on charter schools that pop up?
We believe that.
Okay, let's talk about the money issue in just a moment. I had a radio interview I did earlier this week on the charter schools resolution. The co-sponsor, Representative Edward Lindsay of Atlanta, we were talking about the controversy over local school dollars being spent to pay for state charter schools. Let's listen.
The state has always paid for the charter schools. We've never used local money. That's been a misnomer that we've heard for quite some time, and we shouldn't need to continue it. Keep in mind that what we really are talking about here is giving parents alternatives to traditional schools that might fit a little bit better for their child. And when you have a state education system that we have right now, which has made progress in the past decade, but still has a long way to go, the status quo simply can't be accepted.
And Representative Lindsay was among those we invited to be with us this evening. Well, I get a real disconnect here. Either we're spending local dollars on these state charter schools or we aren't. Well, where's the middle ground here? Is there one?
Well, I guess I would say that Representative Lindsay and I disagree somewhat. It's a matter of semantics. When the original House Bill 881 was passed, creating the Charter Schools Commission, it gave that commission the authority, once they approved a school, to give the charter schools a per pupil amount of state money. That's the same per pupil amount that goes to local districts. But on top of that, what the Charter Commission was empowered to do was to calculate a per pupil amount that a local system would pay for its students, give the charter school that amount of state money for the number of youngsters from a district that was that were attending a charter school, and then subtract that money from the local system. So while technically it was all state money, it was based on local money. It was openly referred to by the members of the Charter Commission as the local contribution. So we referred to it as something of a shell game to use state money to establish a local share for the charter school while penalizing the local system because they didn't receive it.
Okay, just to retrace the dots on that, the state would be holding back the per pupil allotment to send to these charter schools. And so the local school system would have to make up that amount of money somewhere, or just do without it.
That is certainly our view.
Okay, so in a way, then they were using local money going around the block.
That's our interpretation of it, yes.
Okay. As far as the quality of charter schools are concerned, the ones that are up and running now that have been approved by local school systems, what's the quality level there? Are they living up to their charters? Is it worth the effort?
I think most are, and that's the reason that I would repeat what we believe, and that is that we ought to have charter schools. They ought to have a place in the landscape of parental choice, but there ought to be involvement of the local board. I think the ones that have the support of the local board, obviously if the local board supports it, they're going to see to it that it gets the fiscal and financial resources that it needs, and the odds for it succeeding improve dramatically.
As far as numbers are concerned, we have 180 some odd school systems in Georgia. How many charter schools are we actually talking about that are up and running right now? How big an issue is this?
The latest number I've seen is somewhere in the neighborhood of 150, but that includes schools within systems where the entire system is a charter system. That's been a new thing that we've done the last couple of years. It was an initiative of Lieutenant Governor Cagle a couple of years ago, and several systems have gone in that direction, and that increases the numbers pretty dramatically.
Well, and the other issue is with so few schools, why did this become such a huge issue? Were you concerned about a mushrooming problem very quickly if the constitutional amendment was adopted the way it was worded?
In our judgment, yes. It's not that we don't believe in charter schools, but if you have an appointed, somewhat faceless commission in Atlanta that is given the authority to just start schools anywhere they want to, then we thought that there was some provision or some possibility that it could get out of hand.
So you do see a need for a charter system?
Yes.
Per se?
Yes.
If it's done correctly?
Yes.
All right.
In concert with local boards.
Let's talk about the path to that then. What would you like to see happen to make this work? How would that resolution need to be worded to make it work better in your view?
Well, I'm not so sure that there's even a need for the resolution. Petitioners can already approach local boards to have charter schools approved. That's already in the law, and this amendment has nothing to do with that. One of the assertions of the people who are sponsors of the amendment say that it is needed to clarify the Supreme Court's language. They seem to believe that the Supreme Court's language in its decision prohibits the state from having a policy role in education. The attorneys with whom we consult on a regular basis disagree with that, and honest people disagree sometimes.
I haven't talked to any teachers about this, to be honest with you. And what are you hearing from the faculty in these schools versus faculty in public schools? I mean, are they satisfied with what they have so far?
The only real interaction that I've had with others on this issue, at least in terms of education groups, are PAGE, the Professional Association of Georgia Educators, and GAE, and both of those organizations have opposed the amendment.
Okay. One more thing. You were there for the entire debate today.
All day.
Over 2 hours. What impressed you about it?
Lots of emotion, lots of really, really strong feelings about this on both sides, both pro and con. It's just the atmosphere in the Capitol, I think, could only be described today as tense. It was just a very emotional day.
Okay. And apparently we're going to go back and visit it again somehow.
I don't think we're through with it.
All right. Herb, Garrett, thank you so much for being with us again tonight.
Thanks for having me.
We're taking a short break here on Primetime Lawmakers, but don't go anywhere. There's much more to come. The AJC's Andre Jackson and Donna Lowry of 11 Live News will be joining me to continue our examination of charter schools and other education topics. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Primetime Lawmakers. Tonight we've been talking about charter schools. We're going to break this down a bit further. Now, Reporter Roundtable this evening. I'm joined in studio tonight by Andre Jackson, Editorial Page Editor of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and Donna Lowry, Education Reporter for WXIA TV 11 Alive News here in Atlanta. First of all, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm going to ask you one of those typical anchor questions before we get into the details and all this. Were you impressed or even amazed at, first of all, the depth of the arguments and the emotion in that 2-hour debate today at the state capitol on something as arcane as charter schools, Donna?
I didn't think it would come down like this. There had been momentum on this topic in terms of the charter school people with their rallies, and certainly since May we've seen a lot going on, and I just didn't think it would come down the way it did today with the big vote coming down the way it did. I don't know, what about you?
The vote to me also was a surprise, given the energy and the fact that some people have drawn lines in the sand over this issue on both sides of it. It really was a surprise. It doesn't surprise me they're going back at it perhaps tomorrow even.
As quickly as tomorrow. I don't understand the mechanism they will use to do that. They do. But if nothing else, normally with important issues like this, leadership has a pretty good idea how the vote's going to come down. They count votes before they take these votes.
I don't think they knew on this one. I really think that they, well, we saw a lot of things happen in the last few days, you know, since it came out of the House committee. We saw large groups come out against it, the PTA, Georgia PTA to come out against it. We saw Page, the Professional Association of Georgia Educators. And then we saw the Democratic caucus, you know, decide to come out against it. So things were really rolling. But I don't think people still had an idea of where everybody was and where it would all come down today until today, and then very emotional, and then 10 votes.
Yeah,
close.
It was
not
close.
there.
It was close. It takes 120 in the House for an issue like this, a constitutional amendment resolution. Are you surprised at the pressure, both inside and outside of the General Assembly, Andre, on this? I mean, there's some national groups that have been involved with this thing.
I am not. Charter schools have been controversial. Everyone wants children to get a good education. We disagree on how to do that. I saw something today where a Republican lawmaker from South Georgia was rallying support against it, which you wouldn't think given his party affiliation, but his view was that this could hurt rural school systems that already have struggles with funding.
Yeah, that's what I heard too. That the rural areas, you know, well, most of the charter schools you look at in the state, they are in the Metro Atlanta area. So those rural lawmakers saw the writing on the walls that they were going to lose some of the money.
In fact, we talked about that, and even to the point of chartering online.
Yeah.
Special classes, everything from physics to advanced algebra, where they might only have 3 or 4 kids in the schools that were able to take those kinds of classes. With a charter online school, they'd be able to punch in. Especially as far as the rural initiative, too, is a very big factor in this, isn't it?
And those are the districts, as you say, that have fewer resources. And how do you achieve the best results with limited dollars and that won't be getting any less limited anytime soon?
Well, there seems to be 2 major fights here inside this whole issue. One is local control of school boards. Let's talk about that for just a second. These are elected folks. They're constitutional entities, and they have something to say about everything from what the kids read to who's going to run these schools. And will they feel like they're being cut out of the process?
Well, I think, you know, they have their little fiefdoms, and they, you know, we know about that. And I think that was a big issue. But we've seen the growth of charter schools in the state, and we've seen them release a little bit and allow these charter schools to exist. I really think it was about money. This came down to more the money part of it rather than anything else. Because I think the whole idea of choice has kind of grown on Georgia, and that there are all kinds of choices out there. But in the end, it was about the money and where the control was going to be, and whether or not it was going to leave the local level.
And on charter schools now that are chartered by local school boards, they keep control. And they also keep the money. And do you buy the whole notion that it was almost like proving a negative as far as the state money was concerned? It would be state money not going instead of local money coming out. And they'd have to make up that money somehow.
I think it took a while to try to figure that out, too.
Okay, I do too.
I don't think people understood that.
I got lots of disconnects asking that very question over the past week, so maybe with understanding, things will be a little clearer. All right, so we're going to move forward with that in the next few days, more than likely.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. Do you see them out tonight trying to grab 10 more people to make this work? I'm sure there's a lot of little lobbying going on.
It's a little like Congress, isn't it?
That's it.
It sure is. Well, let's move on to a couple of other issues. Education seems to be one of the overriding topics here of this session of the Georgia General Assembly. We're waiting on the budget to move along. Why don't we talk about how the budget is pushing ahead on education? Do they have enough money to do what they want to do?
No, they don't. I think the main thing is that the austerity cuts have been there all along, and while it doesn't look like there are going to be major cuts, we're certainly not going to see the school districts go back to where they were, and so I think they're going to still be hurting.
It's interesting. Governor Deal's proposed budget pushed forth several $100 million of additional funding, but still you have to compare that against more than $1 billion in austerity cuts since those cuts began. So it really depends on how you count it, per child or per year or population-wise, but it's there. We still are not where we were 10 years ago or even 5 years ago.
Will he be able to do what he wants to do with pre-K, add those 10 extra days for pre-K schools?
I think so. I think that'll happen. Yeah, I think what happened last year is they realized it. First of all, they lost some good teachers. when they made the cuts, but also apparently all the slots that they opened up weren't filled. So I think this is kind of balancing things out a little better.
The Common Core initiative is sort of lurking around in the background on all this. It's certainly, I don't think it's so much a legislative issue at this point, but it's coming, it sounds like. What are you hearing as far as it becoming more of a front burner issue? I mean, they're doing video seminars on how it's going to be implemented. 45 some odd states, am I right? About 45 states coming down with the same kind of curriculum so we can compete better with international students?
Well, I think it certainly is necessary that this country and Georgia compete better with other entities because we're in a global economy. And if you really think about it, it's trite, but it's true that there is no such thing as Georgia algebra or California algebra or English for that matter. I mean, there is a strong case to make for some common standards that apply across this nation.
Yeah, I think it'll take a while for people to figure out exactly what it all means. There's talk that we won't have kids learning how to do handwriting, how to do cursive writing, things like that, and worries about those kind of things. So there's still things that have to be worked out. What
is certainly one of the barriers at the door is the Hope Scholarship. And plenty of actuaries are saying that there's going to be more trouble down the road. Anything new on that, or are we just going to maintain the governor's patch that was put into place last year?
I think the question becomes really, what do you want Hope to be in Georgia? If you look at the original intent of it, which was to get more students into college, you can certainly make the argument today that a lot of the students that are funded by Hope would go to college anyway. So what do we want it to be in the 21st century? I think the intent certainly was noble. I think most would agree there is still a need for it. It's just a question of how do you parse a limited number of dollars to try to help as many Georgians as possible and keep them in Georgia and convert them from students to the taxpayers of tomorrow.
Yeah, I think we might see the income cap
really?
At some point. I think people are softening on that whole idea that just anybody should be able to get that money, that maybe if we're going to lose it, maybe we should make sure, if they keep it to a reasonable point, to the new middle class, $140,000, where people didn't realize that was a middle class, that's kind of, some people thought that was upper class. But yeah, I think we might see an income cap.
And when Hope began, there were income caps in places.
$66,000 a year, I think it was. So inflation's working in 20 years up to 140. Thank you both for joining us and digging down to these very complicated and important issues as always. Great to have you with us.
Thank you, Scott.
And coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, the House is expected to reconsider its decision on the charter schools constitutional resolution. We will have complete coverage. And it's the end of the legislative week. That means it's time for legislative experts Buddy Darden and Bill Crane. They'll be joining me live on set, plus all the latest news under the Gold Dome tomorrow on Primetime Lawmakers. Now, if you missed any part of this broadcast, you can catch Primetime Lawmakers when it repeats at 5:30 tomorrow morning. Coming up next on GPB, Georgia Traveler. Tonight, the gang visits the Savannah Music Festival, journeys to Athens to see some high-flying trapeze artists, and catches some Z's in the trees at Panola Mountain State Park. Georgia Travelers next here on GPB. That's our broadcast for the 17th legislative day of the 2012 session. I'm Scott Slade. Join us tomorrow night at 7 for Primetime Lawmakers. Hope you have a good night.
This is a GPB original production.